Hey everybody, this is Perch. Well, it's the afternoon of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And, I kind of hate that everybody's starting a conversation this way when people want to talk about it. It's like, well, whether you agreed with his opinions or not, dot, 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 you have to. And I always feel like that insertion is odd because it puts the message in the wrong place. There was somebody was outside, that somebody was surrounded by people, somebody took a gun, shot him, killed him, and he's dead now. And a lot of other things, like people add in things like, oh, he was a conservative Trump ally. Or, honestly, he has wife and children left behind, as if those modifiers make the situation any better or any worse. It is sad that he has a family left behind. It is true he was a conservative. Um, but it always feels like that's bearing the lead. And the lead was a man was outside and was shot. The man was not carrying a gun. The man was not committing a crime. Whether no matter I've seen some people speculate like, well, the fact that he was, giving these conservative values out here, it's borderline. It's not borderline. It's First Amendment speech. Again, it is not an act of war. It's not a situation where, somebody was in the middle of a battle. It's not like the person was committing a crime by the law. You had an individual who was shot and killed. I get bothered, he's in a Starbucks and there's, I think MSNBC is on. It's like far right commentator and Trump supporter Charlie Kirk killed. And it's like, or here's an alternative headline for you. Charlie Kirk killed. Man shot and killed. Again, the modifiers on there seek to, it's designed to manipulate. And I have a wife and two daughters, obviously, so I do feel horrible for his family for sure. I again, really doesn't matter what political affiliation he had or what he said or didn't say. The spouse of someone who is no longer with them unexpectedly murdered, that's a sad situation, period. But again, all these things I think seek to kind of color the situation. So anyway, that's what happened today, just happened. And I started getting text messages, of course, lots of them. And the text messages are centered around, have you seen this? This is horrible news. Closely tied by, hey, have you checked out the writer for Red Hood #1, a new DC comic? This is Gretchen Felker-Martin, who is a writer for Red Hood. Now, Gretchen Felker-Martin, a lot of people are sending me the same two tweets over and over again. But if you go further, like it's not like this, like one day, Gretchen woke up and started posting like this. Gretchen's been posting like this for all of the history you can find. Like it. This is one of those cases where you don't have to cherry pick through. This is very much somebody who would be extreme back in 2016 during the infamous, baseball bat to the teeth and, some of the other things that were said back then. This would have been extreme then. And there's a giant history of this. So somebody sends me a tweet. So tweets are, Gretchen Felker-Martin, writer of Red Hood #1, says, "Thoughts and prayers, you Nazi bitch." When the news broke that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And then followed that up, because that wasn't enough. You thought of another zinger to kind of throw into the mix. Wrote, "Hope the bullet's okay after touching Charlie Kirk." This a couple days, or I don't know, a day earlier, preceding this. No, not a day earlier, actually same day. On Blue Sky, same individual writes, kept seeing people, TW Red Hood #1 for suicide. And for the life of me, trigger warning for suicide. For the life of me, I could not figure out, I'm like assuming everybody understands it, trigger warning, TW. Could not for the life of me figure out why until I remembered it opens with a bunch of cops shooting themselves. I just don't really consider them people. So this is kind of the commentary. Again, you can go back further and get a whole host of all the expected things, comments about it just all the same, kind of stuff. All, like you spin the wheel on the topic and guess the result. You will get the result you expect from this individual, who is the writer for Red Hood #1. DC was aware and 100% knew that the writer wrote this stuff. I talked to multiple creators and an editor at DC over the last 2 months, all of whom, prior to Red Hood #1, volunteered. I didn't ask. Volunteered like, yeah, the writer has some pretty controversial stuff. Probably I wouldn't have hired this person, and, it's definitely going to get some attention. This is like 2 months ago. It's definitely going to get some attention. And maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but, hey, people are going to make a big deal out of this. And at the end of the day, Red Hood's not a big selling title. So what does it really matter? Well, they're true about that part. Red Hood, whether you have, no matter who you put on it, it's not going to be a #1 selling title. But it does, the fact that you know enough to say, yeah, I know this stuff's out there. Yeah, probably not a good idea, but, it's kind of an indication of, then you should have stopped it. You should have stopped it. So people wrote to me, and one person wrote to me pretty aggressively going, what do you think about this, Perch? And they always do this. They're like, I'm sure you're going to say it's no big deal. We should just ignore it. Why? The people who try and read my mind are the absolute shittiest at reading my mind. So what's my take on this? Yeah, immediate stop. Immediate stop. One issue is out, obviously, now. They all have to stop. You got to stop. You got to pulp it. Sorry, you have to pulp it. You can't ship this comic. There is not, no, you go, but nope. It's a shame for the artist, shame for the colorist, shame for the inker, shame for all that kind of stuff. But you have to pulp the comic. You can't continue with this. Are you mad? You have somebody who posted proudly, I hope the bullet's okay after touching Charlie Kirk, after a man was shot. Now you can grapple, and yes, there are a lot of people, and yes, some of them comic people, mostly fans, celebrating the fact this guy's dead. And you got to, at that point, stop. You can't as a rational, healthy, normal human being celebrate a man's murder. You cannot. It is not acceptable. It's not possible. Even, I spent a lot of time before my grandfather passed. He fought in World War II. And he for him, obviously he was fighting somebody who was running at him with a gun. Well, I mean, he was actually in Pearl Harbor. So, survived it. Obviously saw a lot of his crew died, later went on to be on the ship during the surrender. But there was no part of him that was like, yeah, I really enjoyed that killing. And when they died, we all went back to the mess hall last night and gave a cheer. No, to the contrary. If like the movies will show soldiers having a great time after murdering some people, but in real life, it's horrific. You're shooting somebody. You're doing it in an act of war. This is not war. You don't. A rational, normal human being does not celebrate this, and thus, I don't know. You could call this a fence-sitting take if you really go down. Thus, the business solution here, the rational answer here, is the end. Gretchen has to be terminated. You have to pulp the comic. You can't continue with this. You can't put this book out. And I'll use the same argument people used me. Don't worry about it. It wasn't going to be a top-selling book. You were going to forget about it anyway. That's fine. There's people at DC saying this, so you know this. And I do think it goes a little farther because there does have to be some questions answered, and you can't go on a witch hunt for everything. And we don't know if comments were made to Gretchen saying, hey, we're putting you on this book, but you guys shut the fuck up. You can't say things like that. We don't know. Could be. A whole paper trail on this. So we can go down the rabbit hole of everybody involved in this book should be fired. But again, we do not know enough of the situation What we do know, what facts we do have, is the writer, a writer of a prominent DC book, that she is promoting, that she is, proudly putting, I'm working for DC. Here's something I'm putting out by a major comic publisher, is celebrating the idea that this man is dead, that is making comments around, I hope the bullet's okay, that says, I don't see police as people. So, this scene where they're killing themselves, ha 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 ha. Okay. If you're DC, the liability that you are in, I'm now telling you from a business consultant perspective, you are introducing yourself to such destructive damage needlessly that you have to. So, I think morally you have to separate, but from a business perspective, you have to separate. The damage this is going to do to your brand, the amount of undue. There are frankly, the amount of people who will not purchase or appreciate or go all in on a variant cover or all in or that kind of stuff. The people who are not going to do that will exceed the value you're going to get, the profits you would have gotten from this comic by itself. It will turn more people off than it will gain readers. Gained. There's going to be people who buy every comic. There's comic shops that will definitely fund it. But the amount of people this will turn off, because this one is super cut and dry. This isn't a case of, you can't mask it with there's some fans were egging this person on, or, like with a lot of the Mark Waid stuff, you can say, well, somebody called him a bitch and he called him a bitch in return or whatever. Dan Slott, same thing. A lot of these writers, there is a muddied tit for tat water. Now, as we've talked about in the past, if you're a professional working for a job, you don't get to enter into tit for tat. Sometimes you can't help yourself. It happens, but you should avoid it. You should. But this one, it's just out of the blue. Here's somebody just being a psychopath. So yeah, as DC, unfortunately, the issues that are printed should not continue. You're done. This one can't go. It makes the optics of this get even worse when you consider this is a guy running around as a vigilante with a gun. And you got the writer kind of gloating and mocking and celebrating a guy getting assassinated. You're going to hear a lot from different people of like Charlie Kirk, was MAGA, and if he hadn't said a lot of inflammatory things, and maybe people wouldn't want to shoot him. Here's the thing that the wake up for everyone that just we have to reconcile with. It wasn't okay back in the 60s, back in the 70s, back in the 80s, back in the 90s. It wasn't acceptable to yell fire in a crowded theater because, that inflammatory speech could hurt people. It also wasn't acceptable for the police to go in and shoot the guy who yelled fire in the head. And I'm not accusing Charlie Kirk of doing that. I'm just saying this is why the distraction of his politics it muddies the water. There is not a world where somebody says something you disagree with. Somebody says a statement that is so egregious that the answer is assassination. And we celebrate that assassination because, the guy said some pretty lousy things. Period. There isn't a world of that. So yeah, Gretchen needs it cannot fucking be that Gretchen is like, well, we're going to wrap up this limited series. It's a short series. And then, we just won't give her more work. Unfortunately, no. You have a writer for a title who is promoting your book, who is not saying something like, hey, bigots, this guy's a Nazi. That's bad speech too. This is somebody who is outright celebrating murder. Again, think about just walking into a Starbucks, a grocery store, Target, wherever you happen to be, and you just decide in the middle of, random strangers to, say, boy, I'm sure glad that school shooting happened. Man, those kids had it coming. Imagine, how would that land? Right? That is, once upon a time, they'll land somebody in the insane bin. Today, look, this is clear cut. This is not well, maybe, but if, but what about, no, the end. Person has to be fired. Comment can't be distributed at this point. You're done. You get funny with it and say, well, we'll distribute it, but we'll take her name off of it. No, I mean, you got to separate yourself from it. And then, yes, you do have to look at, okay, so a bunch of people in DC knew this was a problem 2 months ago, knew it, and you went for it anyway. Okay, there has to be some reconciling that. So like I said, I say this firsthand. Talked to a number of different people who all knew this was going on, and you move forward anyway. And then you got not just crazy, but really, really crazy, egregiously crazy. If the top people at DC, creators, editors, if they are not saying, look, nope, there's no sorry here. Because you can't say you're like, sorry, I didn't mean to offend somebody. No, sorry, I didn't mean to celebrate murder. No. So that's it. That's my opinion. You asked, that's it. Thanks for listening.